So welcome. If you're here for the Advocacy 101, Introduction to Local Government, you're at the right place. We are going to focus on San Diego since it is local government. However, the second half, so for those of you who are not in San Diego, you will be able to, there's an Advocacy 101 piece to this that talks about how to engage elected officials and decision makers. So you'll still have some great takeaways that you can definitely apply to other jurisdictions and cities. So I feel like you'll still benefit from this training. And again, just like, thank you so much for your interest. It was really exciting to see so many people register for this. And I do know that we are recording. And so we will make this presentation available to folks who registered. And I just want to give a shout out to my colleague, Hannah, which you all heard here in the beginning. She inspired me giving this presentation for the Local Food Economy Lab. And so I just want to say thank you, Hannah, for initiating the discussion that led to this training that's geared for the Local Food Economy Lab. And we have opened it up for those who even are not part of the Local Food Economy Lab. So we hope that you find this information helpful. And I will be your facilitator today. My name is Consuelo Martinez, and I'll share a little bit more about me in a minute. If we can go to the next slide, please. And just a brief peek into today's agenda, what will we be talking about? So we'll have a land acknowledgement. I'll share a little bit about my background. We'll do an introduction to local government, and we're going to focus on the County of San Diego, Board of Supervisors, and the City of San Diego, mainly because there's 18 cities in the region, and they all have their different unique traits, and so it's a lot to cover in less than 2 hours. So we figured the county and city is a bulk of where a lot of folks live or work. So we're going to focus on that this time. But do you know that if you live outside the city limits of the city of San Diego, or maybe you're in an unincorporated area, I'm happy to chat offline and share more maybe about your city, because I am also have familiarity with other cities and jurisdictions. And then the second half of this training, we'll focus on Advocacy 101 and tips to talk to your decision makers now that you know who they are. Next slide, please. And before I get into it, I'd like to say that the San Diego Food System Alliance acknowledges, honors, and offers our gratitude to the Kumeyaay, Luiseño, Cahuilla, and Cupeño people and land. We recognize that this acknowledgement does not replace action, and as visitors of this territory, we commit to building meaningful relationships with the original stewards of this land and deepening our understanding of the history of colonization. Through the work of the Alliance and San Diego County Food Vision 2030, we seek to elevate ancestral wisdom and indigenous ways of life as essential solutions to healing people and our planet. Next slide. And a little bit about me, if I have not met you yet. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm the Advocacy and Leadership Director at the San Diego Food System Alliance. I joined the organization in October of 2021, a day before their first annual gathering. And I actually met my colleagues the first day of the annual gathering. And I was hired to lead the policy and advocacy work to advance San Diego County Food Vision 2030. And I'm a current resident, and in my dining room table in Escondido, where it's been very hot. It's my hometown. I grew up here since the age of 4. I also currently serve as a city council member for the city of Escondido. I was elected in 2018, and I currently serve. So I'm 6 years into that position. And I bring over 20 years of community organizing experience and leadership development experience. And my areas of community organizing are really around like civic engagement and immigrant rights and human rights. That's really a lot of the focus that I have worked in. And thank you, Hannah, for highlighting my favorite foods. I also love food. And if you're ever in Escondido, if you ever have questions about North County, or you want to know where to eat in my city, I am happy to share my favorite places and even offer tours when you come visit. Next slide. And a little bit about the San Diego Food System Alliance, in case you're not familiar. Our mission is to cultivate a healthy, sustainable, and just food system in San Diego County. And we're a network of leaders in the region who are farmers, fishermen, food business owners, workers, organizers, policymakers, funders, and residents, all committed to building a food system that works for all. And our work is shaped around San Diego County Food Vision 2030, which is a community-led plan and movement that reflects the most important challenges of our time: cultivating justice, fighting climate change, and building resilience. And the photo there below is the first annual gathering, which was my second day of work and the first time that I met my colleagues. And it was really right after COVID. We were still all in masks at that time. It was a really beautiful gathering. And we'll share more about our next gathering that we'll have at the end, towards the end of this year. All right, next slide. So, foundation, we're going to talk about local government. What is the role of local government? You know, the Voice of San Diego, if you're not familiar with them, they're an independent journalism outlet here in the county. And they're really one of my go-to sources for what's happening regionally around government. And so a few years ago, about 3 years ago, they did a series called San Diego 101 of short videos explaining the role of government. And this was inspired really after the murder of George Floyd in 2020, in summer 2020. A lot of people took interest here in the county with cities and budgets and redirecting monies from the city budgets without really knowing who their decision makers were, how even local government works. So sometimes you had people advocating for things at a city council meeting that said, we need this in schools. But in reality, there's a school board that governs that jurisdiction. So really, they felt a need to educate and inform folks about the role of government. So I really like that they did these videos. And while some are outdated, I think they're still very helpful. And so we're going to go ahead and watch a short video that they did on the role of local government.
So big that you could fit the entire state of Rhode Island. San Diego County is big. So big that you could fit the entire state of Rhode Island in it.
So you're probably pretty familiar with San Diego's great food and beaches, but maybe not so familiar with how the region operates and how big decisions get made. One of the most useful things to wrap your mind around is the difference between the city of San Diego and the county of San Diego. Let's dig into that.
The County of San Diego is a government agency that covers the whole county, but within the county are 18 cities. The places outside of the cities are called unincorporated areas.
Cities in the county have very different roles to play in our region. Let's start with what a city does.
Cities have crucial roles in making society work. There are 6 major things a city needs to function. If any of them doesn't work, the city won't work. Number 1, water. A city without water is not a city. 2, wastewater treatment. You have to be able to dispose of sewage. 3, trash removal. No city can function well if trash piles up. Number 4, police. Residents must have someone to call during emergencies. 5, firefighters and emergency medical response. If a house catches fire, it helps to have people who can put the fire out and stop it from spreading to other houses. And number 6, streets and roads and transportation. We all have to get to places.
These functions are managed by individual cities, and each city has a different way of managing things. Now, if a city's doing well, it may have resources for things like rec centers, libraries, parks, other amenities.
At San Diego City Hall, there are 9 city council members who sit on the San Diego City Council. Each one represents the residents and the needs of a specific area. There's also a mayor who represents the entire city. This person is also the chief executive of the city. That means that almost all of the city's employees report to him or her. The mayor can veto city council decisions, and the council can override the veto if enough members team up against the mayor. That's called a strong mayor system. That's different from some other cities in the county, like National City. There, the mayor is just another member of the city council. The council hires a city manager to manage the city's employees. If they don't like the manager, they can fire him or her.
Cities have a lot of latitude when it comes to how they handle their core functions. For example, some cities have police departments, others pay the sheriff's department to patrol. The sheriff patrols all the areas outside the cities. Its budget comes from the county.
The County of San Diego began as an outpost of the state of California. Obviously, the state is very big, so this was kind of the local branch of the state government. The county government's main job is to handle the money and services that the state and federal government send to San Diego. The state has rules for things like healthcare access. Counties have a mandate to care for the poorest people. They are also responsible for public health issues, like if a virus breaks out, and air pollution. Those are all handled by the County of San Diego. Then there are services like food assistance. The federal government has food assistance funding. That goes to the state. The state's program is called CalFresh, and in San Diego, CalFresh is delivered by the County of San Diego. Just like a city council, the county has supervisors who represent specific areas of the region. San Diego County has 5 supervisors. There's no elected mayor, though. The Board of Supervisors hires a chief administrative officer, and the county is the regional government for a lot of places in San Diego that aren't part of cities. The county handles building permits for areas that aren't part of any city. It also delivers roads and emergency services in those areas. And, for much of the region, the county manages libraries and parks.
Both the cities and the county play a major role in what gets built and where. So this can all get pretty confusing. If there's a pothole in your street, who's responsible for fixing that? If you see a county supervisor on television, is that person representing you? And where does the city's authority end and the county's begin? San Diego County and the cities in it are constantly working together to get things done. They play different but complementary roles to keep the region running.
Thank you, Hannah. So yeah, really great introduction on local government, and then just also some things. So there they were talking about the differences of cities and counties. So there's different jurisdictions, and sometimes you could have, for example, City of Escondido. I'll give that as an example because that's where I live. We do have pockets within our city that are unincorporated. And so depending on what happens in that area, it could be something that the city has to handle, or it could be something that the County of San Diego has to handle. And that's really kind of in the outskirts of our city. We have a county park in my city. San Pasqual Valley is, in Escondido, but it's not within city limits. So it falls under City of San Diego, but then there's some areas that also fall within the county. So jurisdiction is what we mean when we talk about who has jurisdiction over that specific area. And then in the video, it was mentioned that government agencies work together to get things done because they have to. So sometimes there's shared interest in something specific. And different elected officials will serve on different bodies, like on transportation. Elected officials are chosen to sit on SANDAG, our transportation board, Joint Powers Authority, things like that. The San Diego County Water Authority has members that are elected officials, and also has members of water agencies that serve on the Water Authority. I didn't mention this during my About Me section, but I did serve on the Water Authority for 3.5 years, and I also sit on the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District, and the San Diego River Park Joint Powers Authority. And these are bodies where different elected officials from the region sit together. So there is like a lot of collaboration that happens within government agencies as well. Okay, next slide. Great. So then let's start with the County Board of Supervisors, which we all have if we live in the County of San Diego, whether it's incorporated or not. You are represented by one of these individuals who are called supervisors. And I'll say this is probably the body of government that most people don't know about. People understand what a mayor is. People know what like a congressmember is, or the president, but a lot of folks don't know that we have supervisors and just the vital role that they play in our everyday lives. Like the county manages everything public health related. So when the pandemic, was occurring, it was not the cities that figured out what to do. It was the County Board of Supervisors that was like really guiding the cities and like how to take care of ourselves during the height of COVID. So we'll start to who's pictured here. So this is Supervisor Nora Vargas. She is the current chair of the County Board of Supervisors. She represents District 1. Next, we have Joel Anderson, who represents more of the East County. He represents District 2. And Nora Vargas and Joel Anderson have all been elected officials before. Nora Vargas was a college board member, Southwestern College board member there, trustee. And then Joel Anderson was on the state senate prior to taking the role on the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. Tara Lawson Reamer is the only one on the Board of Supervisors who's never been elected before. So she got this position having zero elected government experience. She represents District 3 and she's currently the vice chair. Monica Montgomery Stepp is a former council member for the city of San Diego. She is the newest board of supervisor and she represents District 4 and she actually just joined this year. So her position, the reason that she joined was, you may remember Nathan Fletcher, former supervisor representing District 4. He left his seat early. There was a scandal that broke out, which made him resign his post. So at that time, the Board of Supervisors could have decided to appoint someone that is not hold an election and then between themselves, agree who would fill that vacancy. But at that time, that left them with 4 supervisors. And usually what happens in that situation, that's why it's good to have 5, because when you have 4, something that can happen is a deadlock where, there's a 2-2 vote and then you deadlock. There's no path to success. So you had that at the time when that was vacant, you had 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats on the council, and they just were not going to agree on who to appoint. And rather than go through that whole exercise, they pretty much unanimously said, we're going to just put it to the voters to decide, which I personally think is the best way to have a representative, is let the people decide instead of, the politicians. My opinion, though. And then Jim Desmond, he is actually my current supervisor. He represents the bulk of North County, and he was a former mayor of San Marcos and involved in local government in San Marcos for a very long time. He represents District 5. A little bit about chair and vice chair. Those are rotating titles that usually every year they'll decide who's going to be chair, who's going to be vice chair, and that's pretty much who runs a meeting. Because remember, the county board of supervisors, there's no like mayor figure, so they all have equal power, equal voting, and really the chair is like the face of the board of supervisors. They're the ones that set the agenda for the council. So it is a good role to be in, and usually they do alternate. Another thing, these positions are nonpartisan in the sense that when you vote for them on your ballot, there's no D or R next to their name. So at local government, it's less partisan, I would say, than like Congress, which is a benefit to local government because they're accessible. Like, you can actually meet any of these supervisors at an event. They have staff that are at community events. So they're easy to reach and actually personally meet and talk to, versus like Congress, like good luck meeting your Congress member or speaking to them directly. You might have to go to a fundraiser to be able to access them. But the great thing about local government, and it's my favorite form of government, is that they're accessible and they're less partisan. I mean, they all have their views, right? They all have their views, and it gets partisan. But I would just say that at the local level, the more hyper local you go, the more I think you can get done, because you live in the neighborhoods that you're representing. Like, you're not off in DC somewhere for the majority of your time. Like, your people will find you in your grocery store and hold you accountable. Which is what I think is really awesome. And me as a local elected official, like, I run into people all the time and they're always reminding me of things that they want to see. So whether I'm at the thrift store, the grocery store, or at the gas station, my community holds me accountable, and they know where I live and they know where to find me. So I feel like that makes them really work to the benefit of the communities. And so right now, there is a Democratic majority on the council, on the supervisors. However, I would say the majority of the time they are in agreement on most issues. It's only on certain things where they might have, split votes around party lines. But an important thing to also know about the Board of Supervisors, the diversity that you see here has not always been there. It's pretty new. The Board of Supervisors for the longest time had elected officials who were there for over 20 to 25 years, and they didn't have term limits. And so recently, a few years ago, voters decided that they wanted term limits because really the leadership didn't reflect the community. They had been there for a very long time. And the disadvantage of being, and this is not in all cases, but one disadvantage of being in government in the same position for a long time is, people get comfortable and then there's not a lot of change happening. And so it was a majority all Republican, all white supervisors for decades. And San Diego is a diverse community, and so it didn't reflect the community. And so the term limits really changed the demographics on the supervisors. And now, there's a Democratic majority, there's more women, there's people of color. So Nora Vargas was the first Latina to serve in this capacity. And I believe Monica Montgomery Stepp was the first African American to serve in this role. So a lot of diversity on the council. I mean, on the board of supervisors, excuse me. And we won't click on the link now, Hannah, but if you see here underlined under supervisors, you will get these slides, and that takes you to the page for the supervisors if you want to do a deep dive into who they are. I really recommend that you go to each of their websites. We are going to go through an exercise today where you can identify who your supervisor is, and we'll show you how to do that. But get to know who they are, which district you live in, who your supervisor is, and definitely sign up for their newsletter so that you know where they're going to be, the kinds of issues that they care about, because every supervisor has different priorities. And I will say, Joel Anderson, he represents a lot of the rural communities. Like, that's a huge priority for him, is really uplifting the voices of rural communities. So again, depending on the area that they represent, that's the kind of issues that they uplift. And in a little bit, I'll pause for questions. So don't worry. Between each section, I'll pause in case you have any questions, or I can go into more specifics. So at a glance, this is the current district boundaries for supervisor. If you observe these, they don't look the same, right? Like some of them, like District 2, District 5 are really big, but then look at District 1, that's, close to the border area, and then District 4, those are smaller districts. And then you have District 3, which is kind of the middle-sized one. Why is that? Districts have to be pretty much the same population. And every 10 years after the census, which by the way, every 10 years, which 2020, we just had the census. I think it got delayed because of COVID. But every 10 years, there's a survey that goes out to all residents for you to participate in the census. Super important, because that's how they count people. That's how they know population size. And it also is important to count everyone, because depending on the number of people, that's the kind of like federal funding that comes your way. So it benefits you to get counted in your community. And then after that process is done, the districts change, because if one area grew significantly, they have to adjust the boundaries. There's a whole process of how those boundaries get drawn, with independent commissioners hearing public testimony on which neighborhoods should be together. And then they draw the boundaries. There was a pretty significant change after this last redistricting. So I used to be in District 3 prior to 2020. Tara Lawson-Remer was my supervisor, and you see her area. She lives in Encinitas. I live in Escondido, kind of a weird boundary. But after the redistricting process happened, everyone was like, North County has to stay together. So that's what happened. The 78 corridor and rural communities like Fallbrook, Bonsall, Valley Center, we all are in one district now, which is District 5. So a lot of people advocated to like keep North County together. And so in other communities as well, there was people advocating for communities to stay together. And that really resulted in the boundaries that we see today. Next slide. I can nerd out on this stuff all day, everybody. I love it. Okay, so here we're going to take a pause for an activity, because the goal is for you to understand local government and know who your elected officials are. So Hannah's going to take us to a link, and she's going to do a quick demo. The San Diego County, this is like a GIS map, so it's interactive. You can zoom in and zoom out. It's a cool feature, and a lot of jurisdictions are now using GIS mapping in their websites. However, she's putting in our office address here. And we're going to show you here. So you see the full zoomed out map, what district we're in, and show you how to do it. So if you go here, if you go to show more results, Hannah, it doesn't give you any information, but it tells you, okay, this is the area. So I still don't know who my elected official is. So on this one, you have to kind of zoom out a little bit and find the number. So X out of that box so we could try to see the number. There it is, number 4. It's way on this side. So if you click on number 4, it tells you, oh, Monica Montgomery Stepp, we're in the 4th supervisorial district. So our office for San Diego Food System Alliance is in the Mission Hills area, and that is represented by Supervisor Montgomery Stepp. So not a super user-friendly tool, but if you just got to find the number and then zoom in. Thank you, Hannah, for that example. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it. Let's see here. We're going to, I don't know if they can access the link through that. So let's see here. Let me try to get that.
I put it in the chat.
Oh, you're awesome. Thank you. I was trying to be helpful. Thank you, but you're faster than me, Hannah. So in the chat, if everyone can please go to the link that Hannah just posted, and you will see this link to the county supervisorial maps. And we're just going to give you about 3 minutes for you to type in your address. Don't worry, we won't be able to see where you live. So go ahead and do that now, and we'll come back in 3 minutes so that you can identify your county board of supervisor. And once you do, give me a thumbs up or something so I know that it's working and that you were able to find your supervisor. And you go to click the link, enter address, and then remember you have to find the number and then click on that. And because I want to know who, in addition to who's here, feel free to put the number of the district that you're in, whether that's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in the chat. I'm curious to see how many. Okay, got some district 4s and 5s. Okay, lots of 4s and 5s so far. 1 and 3, got some 1s popping up, some 3s. Okay, well, there's our first 2, okay. Okay, good, it's working. Great. All righty. And we'll also share the link so you'll be able to access it and share it with anyone you want to later. Okay, great. So then let's go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, awesome. Great to see that. Okay, and then just some other important things to note because there's just so much staff. There's other important county leaders. Here we have the county council, which is the attorney, the clerk of the board. So a clerk is really an important role. So when you're going to learn about giving public testimony later in the training, but the clerk is someone like when you want to make a request for documentation, or you have a question about like city council meetings or board of supervisor meetings, the clerk is your friend. They're also helpful in providing information if you want to join boards and commissions, which I'll delve just a little bit about. So yeah, be nice to the clerk. They can help you navigate systems and bureaucracy when it comes to the elected officials. So always be nice to the clerk. And in this case, it's Andrew, and I do see him at the supervisor meetings. He's the one that lets people know when it's their time to speak and things like that, and he helps run the meetings. Other elected officials, is the county assessor, clerk, recorder, the district attorney, the tax collector, treasurer, and the sheriff. So some jurisdictions have elected sheriffs, some don't, but in our case, the sheriff is elected. And then a new position, which is the chief administrative officer or the CAO, is a super important role because they're the ones that run the county. So any direction that the board of supervisors give, it's up to the CAO to direct their staff into implementing the policies of the elected officials. And you may have heard, if you follow the news, there has been a lot of I would say drama around who the next CAO would be, difference of opinions and the processes. So the last CEO retired, and that created a vacancy, and they were actually going to choose a new CAO before Nathan Fletcher resigned, and they paused it after so they had already like had someone in the queue, had interviewed people, and they paused that after he left his position and decided to wait for the new supervisor, who is now Monica Montgomery Stepp. And they decided not to change and choose a new leader. They had an interim CAO. And so there has, you know, Ebony Shelton is the new CAO, and she's not new to the county. She's actually been in a different role there, so she's not new to the county. But they did hire within, and just recently she was officially took on this role this month, and she again oversees county staff, and she is the first woman of color to hold this position, which is a really important, powerful position as well. And again, she just started in this role, but she is not new to the county. Next, please. Let's see what the next slide. Okay, and then just for some, you know, so you could some visuals here. Here's every organization has an organizational chart, and it shows you, you know, who leads what. And so here at the top is you, the residents of San Diego County, because you elect and vote for your board of supervisors. And then I just talked about the chief administrative officer, who works at the direction. She is hired and fired by the board of supervisors unless they resign or retire. And then she manages all the staff and the departments. And so below you have the public safety group, which includes animal services, child services, district attorney, emergency services, probation, fire sheriff. There's just so much that the county does, as well as land and environment, which really is very pertinent to food systems work, which includes ags, weights, and measures, environmental health and quality, the new Office of Sustainability and Environmental Justice, Parks and Recs, planning, anything land use, public works. And then there's finance, of course, and just something that I want to highlight here, some things that are food system related is like purchasing and contracting. There's some like food procurement where they're, you know, procuring from local farmers. So that touches that an area in this area. There's new offices here that I wanted to highlight: Office of Equity and Racial Justice, the Office of Ethics, Compliance, and Labor Standards. So remember when I said that there had been a change at the County Board of Supervisors? Well, that also changed the conversations that are being had at the County Board of Supervisors. And really regionally, there's been a huge shift in who holds office. It's more diverse, as I mentioned, with the Board of Supervisors. And so that has really changed the conversation. It has led to the creation of new policies, new departments, new offices. And I can remember even like 7 years ago, jurisdictions not even talking about climate change. Like it was just like a kind of a taboo subject. So there's just, even as early as like 6, 7 years ago, things about like climate resilience or social justice, racial justice, equity, those are conversations that really weren't being had until recently. And that's really because of different elected officials that are changing the conversation. So I wanted to uplift that because that has led to the creation of some of these new offices, and it has been a rocky road because it doesn't mean that just you create an office and everything's great. Some of these offices it's still been years and there's really been not a lot that has come from them, but again, it's new. And I just wanted to really show that there has been a lot of change in a short amount of time, but it might not seem like it, but it's there. And it does take time. Change does take time, but conversations definitely change, and the things that are being voted on, the policies that are being proposed at these local levels has really shifted because of the different leadership. Another thing I want to plug, in case you didn't know, is that counties and cities have something called boards and commissions. And in a previous role, I actually taught people about how to join boards and commissions, because these are boards, advisory boards, commissions, task force that need residents to serve as members. They're usually volunteer. There's a few paid opportunities, but they help make decisions and recommendations to the governing body, whether it's the Board of Supervisors, the City Council, on specific topics. So, you know, you can't be experts on everything. And so really boards and commissions really help give voices and recommendations to people who are passionate or just really knowledgeable about those subjects. So if that's something you're interested in, consider peeking on the websites and find out what boards and commissions exist. And if there's a topic there that you're passionate about. I myself joined a board and commission in my 20s. I was the youngest person, the only Latina on the board at the time. And it was very fascinating to kind of understand like agendas and how governance works at that hyper local level. But it was a really great introduction for local government. So I highly recommend, if this is something that you're interested in, to consider looking at the list of boards and commissions. The county has over 100, and they're from all kinds of subjects. My chiropractor actually sits on the cemetery board, and he always talks to me about stuff that they do at the cemetery, and I'm like, oh, I had no idea. So all the things that function that we don't think about, people make that happen, right? When we turn on our water, the water doesn't just magically appear. There's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of people that really help us get water. So that applies to lots of things that we may take for granted or may not know how it works. So encourage you to check that out. Next slide. Okay, so let me pause for a minute because I feel like I've shared tons of information here. Any questions or comments so far on County of San Diego? Let's see, I'm gonna look at the chat. So one
I have,
comment says,
oh,
oh, yes, who was
hi,
it?
this is Fatima.
Hi.
I just had a question, hi, because I live in an unincorporated area of the county, so and I've been paying attention, taking notes too, but can you just go over briefly, like how do things get decided there as far as like road repairs or street
Yes.
lights or things like that?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Great. I'm glad I have someone in the unincorporated area. Yeah, so unincorporated areas, which unincorporated means you're not incorporated as a city, so you don't have a city council. So then by default, you have your supervisor. That is kind of like your city council or your local form of government. So you
Mhm.
would go through your Board of Supervisors office to contact them on any kind of issues related that they have jurisdiction. So if you're unincorporated, your Board of Supervisor will be your go-to.
Okay.
And then also, hold on one sec.
Do you know offhand if any of the specific committees and boards are particularly focusing around areas that are unincorporated?
Yeah, hold on one second.
Yeah,
Hana,
no worries.
can you do a slide presentation real quick?
Share the screen with the slide
Okay,
presentation.
yeah, sorry. Okay, so I was, okay, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Fatima?
Um, oh, I was saying for like some of the boards and commissions or committees or whatnot, are there any of those that you know offhand that are specifically for areas that are unincorporated?
Oh yeah, so they all are. They a lot of them are.
Oh,
So there's not all. You can be like in a city. Yeah, there's a lot there. If you look on the list of 100, and we can send a link, there's
okay.
I
I
can't
just
even
found the website
imagine.
too. Yeah, I'm looking at
Yeah, I can't even
it.
like list or begin to list the different boards and commissions. Um there's just so many of them, and they're always changing, and some of them are more active than others. And I will say on some of those seats they're specific, like they might have like you need an engineer or you need someone in like the health field. So some of them
Mhm.
are specific to things like that, or you need to be in a specific neighborhood or things like that. So
Okay.
yeah, there's just so many, Fatima. But if you look on there, I'm sure you'll find something that piques your interest.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. This is
Yeah, and I just wanted
so
to plug
interesting.
that because most people don't know that that boards and commissions exist, and I felt it would be appropriate to share that.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's a
That's
whole
new to
other
me. As soon as
presentation
you
and a
said it, I
whole
like looked
other
it up.
training. Yeah, and I've done trainings on those, so that maybe that's something in the future if there's enough interest and we can find some food system specific ones. Maybe that's something in the future that we can offer. So I'll definitely keep my eye out on that.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Sure, thank you for your question. And then just Kemi says, um, okay, let me go back here. Sorry, I got some questions in the chat. So yes, having dealt with some of these offices, just more funding being spent, not much return on investment. I'm curious how the 18 cities came to be, if there was a why they became incorporated. Okay, well, try to talk about that. And if an office or position was created but is not providing value, is there a history of dissolving, or are we stuck trying to maintain it? Okay, and then we'll share the link, Jazzy, of where to find boards and commissions. There's so much that the county has.
I put one in the chat now. Consuelo, can you check if that's the one you would like to share?
Okay, let me see here.
Boards, commissions, and committees.
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. You're so on top of it, Hannah. Thank you.
There's a portal. I'm gonna share with the link to the.
Okay, a couple things. Let's see here. So unincorporated and incorporated, yeah, they're different. The history of them, I'm not sure, but usually it's like, you know how in the video it said you need to have water, you need to have wastewater. So when a community gets big enough and they start to need these things, that's usually when they'll decide, hey, we need to become incorporated. But like for an example, my city was incorporated in 1888. That was a long time ago. So I'm not really sure. I'm sure it was because they grew. They grew, right? That they said, hey, we're going to do this. But who knows? It could be because of a fight, as well with like, another jurisdiction. Um, and some just kind of don't want to become incorporated. Like some folks in like rural communities, they don't necessarily like, they like being remote. They don't necessarily want a lot of people there. They don't necessarily want development. They like the quiet, peaceful nature. So then they might not want to become incorporated. Like, they just like, we're good. We like being small town feel. So it just kind of depends on that. But I would say probably because they grew and they needed all this like infrastructure in a way to like pay for that. So yeah, so unincorporated cities usually end up, unincorporated communities, because they're not cities. Unincorporated communities end up being, I think, smaller and just more rural. Yeah, so that's kind of in San Diego, that's kind of like the observation on unincorporated. And then also, like I mentioned, Escondido has like pockets of unincorporated. Like there was like ranchos, like ranches in some parts, not in my district, but in another district, there's like places that were like, ranches. And they just kind of never got annexed into the city limits. So there's pockets of areas that are outside, just outside the city limits. They may get sewer, or be on septic instead of like the sewer. And in order to annex into a city, like there's a process for that, and your neighbors have to agree to it. But then there's also fees to like hook up to the sewer system, which sometimes might not be financially worth it. So there's all these kind of like technicalities of whether people decide to like be unincorporated or not. And it's usually kind of who provides the services to them. That's really the biggest difference these days. Okay, and then Kemi, I think depends on what specifically you're talking about, but there could be, how I said there's an office on like racial justice, there's an office on, if there was like a shift in elected officials and they didn't prioritize, climate or, environmental justice or racial justice, they could dissolve an office in the future if that's something that they don't want to, or they could create a new office or, so that does happen. There could be a track that someone is taking and then the change of leadership changes and then they want to focus somewhere else. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask, like, do they, like, I have my own personal opinions about some of these offices, but like, for instance, me as the business owner where we had our store and we had certain licenses, like for as an example, like tobacco license, where originally it was permitted through the state. It was permitted to the state, and then the county wanted to start regulating it, and then with that was a requirement for an additional license for tobacco. And in speaking with the people, it didn't provide any additional value to it. It was something that was pushed through some heart association or something like that. And it was going to be an additional, like almost $1,400 additional license requirement. So I went to the meeting. I voiced my concern saying that at least for us as a store out there, we couldn't afford it because we only even had that just to make it where our townspeople didn't have to drive an hour away for their vice. But my thing was, what is this supposed to prevent? And eventually we just had to get rid of it. There was no way I was going to pay $1,300 for that. And then, but the questions a lot of the other business owners were asking, like, hey, you guys are doing this because you said that kids are having access. do they have a system of reevaluating, especially stuff with what it burdens citizens or businesses with additional costs? Is there a way for them to go back to something and say, okay, did we actually get the outcome we wanted from this, or did we create office? Did it, because they literally created another office with 3 additional people to pay a salary for. Mind you, 2 of them showed up in my store and I had to scream at them because they were in the way, they weren't doing anything. So my question is it once they create something, is it, and then we're just required to be maintaining something when it has no value for the
Yeah.
town money?
So I would say that, so that's what, it's important to kind of follow like what the agendas are of the council meetings. And I can totally see what you're talking about, because we had a similar situation in my city where we actually banned public smoking. However, there's no enforcement of it. So, you sometimes there's good intentions behind things, or there could be unintended consequences that no one, like maybe that when they pass this, the unintended consequences that it's hurting small businesses, but they didn't know that. And because it was not something that you were alerted to, you weren't able to be part of the conversation, right? So there's still a way for you to like lobby or advocate for, hey, this is really problematic. It's not, it's not working for me. And then if you have others join you, that's something that you can advocate for. And yeah, policies can change. It just there needs to be a majority that's willing to do that. So, but it's about engaging your elected officials and letting them know, like, this is a barrier, you're not helping my business. And so just continue to lift up that message. And again, it could take a long time. It just depends on priorities, capacity, a bunch of things. But we're going to go into advocacy in a little bit. So hang tight, because hopefully that'll help give you some tools. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move to City of San Diego. But feel free to use the chat if you have questions that pop up that you want to get out of your head and not forget. So yeah, let's go into City of San Diego. So here are the current San Diego City Council. So in representing the first district is Council President Pro Tem Joe LaCava, representing first district. Councilmember Jennifer Campbell represents District 2, Councilmember Stephen Whitburn, District 3, Councilmember Henry L. Foster III represents District 4, Councilmember Marnie Von Wilpert, District 5, Councilmember Kent Lee, District 6, Councilmember Raul Campillo, District 7, Councilmember Vivian Moreno, District 8, Council President Shaniela Rivera, District 9, and then the mayor, who's also elected, and I'll talk more about his role in a moment, and that's Todd Gloria. He's a former assembly member and former city council member. So a little bit about, if we could just go back to that. We're still, yeah. So council president pro tem and Joe and council president. So those are, again, kind of similar to board of supervisors. Those are alternating titles. They do happen through a council vote to decide who's going to be holding those positions. In the past, it gets very political to decide who's going to be council president. Like, I've always watched and read stories about like that, just the politics of like who's going to be the one that's going to be recommended and where the majority going to align with. So an interesting fact about the San Diego City Council, which is, for the very first time that I can remember, it's an all Democratic council. So there are no Republicans or no party preference people on the city council. They're all Democrats, which that was like unheard of years ago. And it's always, and then in the last several years too, there's always kind of been a mix. But again, the redistricting, right, and the just changing demographics, it has really changed the face of who represents us in the leadership. But even though it's all Democrat, and again, hyper local, right, nonpartisan seats, there's no DRRs when they run for office. Even though that's the case and they're all Democrats, they're not all the same, right? Everyone has their own opinion, their own way of thinking, and there's even alliances that form within them. Some of them tend to side more with others, and I'm not going to get into that because that's like, again, that could be a whole other presentation. But yeah, they're not always in agreement, right? And then also depending on what communities you represent, like, are you in a coastal community, or are you in a more like rural community? Are you close to the border? I mean, there's all these different uniqueness of the districts that really come to play when it comes to these districts. That's the beauty of districts, is that you have advocates fighting for the neighborhoods, representing the people and the unique needs that those neighborhoods have. That's why we have districts. And I think it's a good thing, but there is a lot of like negotiation that has to happen. So all Democratic City Council members, the newest member of the City Council is Henry L. Foster III. He has never held public office before. He actually is a former staffer of now Supervisor Monica Montgomery Stept. I believe he was her chief of staff, definitely on her staff. So he's not new to the city in that he worked with her while she was a council member. So when she vacated her seat to run for the supervisor seat, he ran and won his seat. So he's the newest member of District 4 and then just started that position this year. And then Shawnee Rivera, former colleague of mine, he's the council president. He represents District 9, which includes like City Heights. And he's been council president for probably 3 years. So he's, and that's another thing that kind of got contentious last time. It was a very split vote on that. But just like a little bit of the San Diego City Council, this is a unique way of government because they are a charter city. So there's general law cities and charter cities, and we're gonna go into the difference real quick. But so in November of 2004, voters had changed over to a strong mayor system. Before, they used to have a city manager. So it was done in a 5-year trial basis, where they got rid of the city manager and the mayor served as the city manager role, the one that runs the city staff in the city. So this new form of government removed the mayor from the legislative body and installed them as a de facto executive director of departments and employees overseeing the city's day-to-day operations. It also, at this time, it also introduced the concept of a council president chosen annually by majority vote of the council to chair and set the agenda for the council meeting. So council president is a very important role because they set the agenda and facilitate the meetings. And in June 2010, voters passed Prop D, which made the new strong mayor form of government permanent. So it's no longer a trial. And it also approved the addition of a 9th council district after the 2010 census. So there's after 2010, that's when you had 9 council districts. And the city council, so the mayor has vetoing power. So if something passes on the city council and they want to veto it, the mayor wants to veto it, he can do that. And the city council can overwrite the mayor's veto, but they need a majority of 2/3, which would be 6 council members. And this is something that doesn't happen often because the mayor runs the city and you don't want to have a bad relationship with the mayor. So there's a lot of thought and consideration that goes into, is it worth vetoing the mayor? So again, lots of collaboration, negotiations that have to happen to try to get people's agendas and policies through. I don't recall of a specific veto where the mayor vetoed something and 6 council members joined forces against the mayor. I don't recall a situation when that happened, but it is possible. And then also through this change of government, they've also expanded the number of council committees to redefine their role and purpose, choosing a funneling more of the legislative items through the council committees to allow for increased public input and a fuller vetting process before items are sent to full council agenda for consideration. And as of today, there are 10 council committees. Those are where there's only a few council members that propose policy before it comes to the full council vote. And you can also participate in those meetings and inform policy at an early stage before it goes to full council. Okay, now we can go to the next one. So, great. So now really quick activity. We're gonna do the same thing. And luckily this is a more user-friendly platform. We're gonna paste the link in the chat. And then Hannah will quickly do a demo on how to find your city of San Diego. So only if you're in the city of San Diego. If you live in Escondido, if you live in El Cajon, this won't work for you. This is only if you live within the city of San Diego limits. This will apply to you. We're gonna put our address here, our office address. And see, it pops up, we're in District 3. So who is our representative? Stephen Whitburn is our representative in District 3. So thank you, Hannah, for posting that. Go ahead and find, if you're in the city of San Diego, go ahead and find your city council member and see who they are. And to let me know that you've done that, if you are city of San Diego, go ahead and put what district you're in. So question, does the city of San Diego encompass more than one county district? Yes. They're different boundaries, so you could be in completely different districts. We all have a county district. Not all of us are in the city of San Diego, though. So again, which city, share in the chat which city council district you're in. District 8, okay. And also District 8, Vivian Moreno, she was former staffer to now Assembly Member David Alvarez. So sometimes staff within the elected offices run for office themselves. That's something I'm seeing a lot more happening. Okay, District 5. Great, okay. Give it another minute. And again, just put which city of San Diego district are you in? All right, we can go to the next slide, Hannah. Okay, several District 8 showing up. And again, we're not going to get into the weeds here, but again, there's an organizational chart for all jurisdictions. So here in the middle, you have the residents of San Diego because you all elect, if you're in the city of San Diego, the city council. The city attorney is also elected, and the mayor. And again, here you see the mayor has a chief of staff. So it's like their cabinet. So a lot of times when there's a new mayor, they change, their chief of staff, and they'll have different departments that they oversee. So usually when a mayor leaves an office, he'll hire staff, and then a lot of times they leave. Like when there's a change of administration, there's a lot of new people that come in. Not so much at the bottom buckets where you see financial, neighborhood services, infrastructure. There, it doesn't change very much. But when it comes to under the chief of staff, Paola, there you have like government affairs, the boards and commissions director, and now there's a new chief race and equity officer. I'm not very familiar with that position or when that came on board. Yeah, usually those people change when the mayor change. So there's a lot of turnover when it comes to when new mayors are elected. Okay. And then you can find all this on the city website, and you want to get a deep dive, like, hey, which departments, what departments does the city have, and who's in charge of these departments, things like that. Also, when you're not sure who to go to, you can always try to find that person on the staff directory and then say, hey, who do I go to for this? So it just gives you like an actual person to contact as well. So next slide also has the remaining of this long organizational chart, just so you can see all the different departments and staff, heads of staff that exist within city government. It's huge. Next slide. Okay, we'll pause right here before we get into the Advocacy 101 on how to reach your elected officials. Any questions on City of San Diego? Let's see. I'm going to see if I can see any hands raised. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Okay, great. Well, then let's go ahead and get to the Advocacy 101 piece. Next slide. So how to reach your representatives. Now that you've identified your representatives, and by the way, this is just for local government. So if you want to find out who your congressional representative, who your state representatives are, they also have websites, and you can go and just Google who's my Congress member, who's my assembly member. who's my senator, and you can also do something similar where you type in your address and that pops up. And then again, this is only for like local. So if you have something within the county of San Diego and you have a question, you reach the county board of supervisors. If it's something related to your city, right, not unincorporated, but your city, then you would go and find out who your representative is and reach out to them. If it's something like EDD, like I haven't received, my benefits, you would not call your council members, you would call the state, and try to reach your assembly member. Sometimes people call me about things that are out of my jurisdiction, and I'll refer them to like, an assembly member's office. Like, hi, can you help this person who hasn't been receiving their unemployment benefits? And I'll connect them, and then they now have a contact there. So depending on what your issue is, depends on who you reach out to. And I have a beautiful picture here of the dome at City Hall in Escondido just because it's so beautiful. And I just admire City Hall. So yeah, make sure you know who your representative is. That's the first step. And now you all know how to do that. And then when you reach out to them, you're going to mention that you're a constituent because they want to hear from constituents. If I go into a representative's office or a meeting and I say I'm from like a different community that they don't represent, it's not going to be, as I feel, a priority. They have so many things that they have to juggle with. They'll still listen to you, but in reality, they have limited capacity, limited time, limited budget. They have to prioritize what they're going to work on. There's so many needs and issues, but they have to prioritize. And getting to know who your representative is, you learn about their priorities, what things they like, and it's easier for you to connect with them. But most importantly, they want to be able to help the people who live in their district. So whether you live, work, or vote in the district, you want to make sure that they know that. And there's different ways to reach them. You can send an email or message them via their public official website. So different elected officials, we have different lives, right? So personal lives, but they're public officials. They have an official website. So you should contact them on their official website. Don't contact them on their family Facebook page, right? Be respectful of that. And they have a website where the public can reach out to them. You can also call if somebody is like not accessible, like an elected official that maybe you're not able to reach as accessible because they're, in Congress or something like that. You can always call and speak to staff or leave a message stating your position or ask. I do that a lot when I'm wanting my state representatives or federal representatives to take a position. I call a number and like leave a message. You can also visit local elected officials. A lot of them have office hours or they'll be at a community public event. So they'll host town halls. They might say they're going to be in an event. That's why it's so important to like get on their mailing list, on their email list or newsletters, because they tell you about meetings where they want to hear from you on specific topics. So it's great to know about those opportunities. I remember when Council President Shawnee No Rivera was holding office hours in like the City Heights Parks and Rec room, on like last Fridays or something like that. So watch out for those kind of opportunities because you can actually show up in person and talk to them. And it's less formal too, so it's a little easier to talk to them when it's kind of that face to face and it's not the TV or the microphone in your face. You can also engage them on their social media channels. By law, elected officials cannot delete your emails or block you. I know my former mayor for the city of Escondido got, I don't know if he got sued, but he was definitely, a lawyer was involved with because he had, I believe, blocked someone from social media. And you all had heard about the, former president also blocking people on Twitter. So please, if you're an elected official, don't do that and just know that they're not supposed to do that. So freedom of speech and they're supposed to be accessible to us. So they're not supposed to block us on social media, assuming that you're contacting them on their official social media, not their personal one. Next slide. Okay. And then my favorite way, and I think a super effective way to reach your elected officials is by providing public testimony that's showing up in person to speak at a microphone in front of them when they're sitting on the dais, which can be very intimidating and nerve-wracking to do, especially if you don't like public speaking. So it's something that most people are not used to. but it's super impactful, and they have to listen to you because you're there at their meeting. Sometimes they're being televised or recorded, right? But you get a minimum of time to speak. Usually it's between 2 to 3 minutes. Sometimes that time gets cut down depending on the number of speakers they have. The person running the meeting, who facilitates the meeting, has the chair or the mayor, can change the time depending if there's like 100 people that want to speak and they don't want to be there past midnight. They can say, we're only going to give you a minute. So that's a possibility as well. But really, this is such an impactful way to get your message out. And so it's called oral communications, and there's just oral communications on any topic that you can talk to, or it can be on a specific agenda item. So when it's in a specific agenda item, you have to speak when that item is being discussed. If it's non-agenda public comment, then you usually can speak at the beginning or end of the meeting, depending on their rules and how they run the meetings. But let's just say you want to talk about something and it's not on the agenda, or you haven't been able to reach your elected official, or they don't respond to you. This is a really great way to be like, hey, I'm at a loss of who to go to. This is what I need help with. And everyone's listening to you. So the colleagues, and I would just say be kind, and I'm going to get into like kind of the mechanics and tips for this. But I always think it's so powerful when people give public testimony, and I highly encourage that you do it at least once in your life. And also go to a council meeting or a board of supervisor meeting in person. It will give you an appreciation for people who run for office and serve in these capacities, even if you don't agree with them. And you meet other people and see what are the topics of the day, what are people passionate about. You can meet neighbors who might be passionate about the same subject that you're passionate about, and people learn about you. Like I remember before I was a council member, I would go a lot to council meetings and speak, and I remember other people would give public testimony, and I'd be like, oh, that person spoke my mind. I really totally identify with what they're saying. And I'd go afterwards and I introduce myself. And you make a new friend, you make a new ally, you can team up with people who have shared priorities as you. So really quick, we're gonna go watch a video of a sample public testimony so you can see what I'm talking about.
Good evening, Council. Last week, Oceanside City Council directed staff to prepare a law to eliminate single-use plastics. About 30 citizens offered public comments. Half were children between 7 and junior college, most fifth graders. Last night, about a dozen children under 12 years old spoke in Vista about banning pesticides. When was the last time a group of young students spoke to an issue in Escondido? Could it be because you were not addressing their valid concerns? Climate change is code red for humanity. I urge you to include an environmental topic in every council meeting. Surely you want to hear from our children who will have to grapple with the environmental mess that we have made as they become responsible for our world. And please impanel an environmental commission or a mayor's select commission, or give it whatever name you want. It can work with the city to reduce the harms to our community as temperatures rise and life on our planet struggles. In a council meeting last month, you agreed to appoint some kind of environmental commission. I understand that hasn't happened yet. I want to urge you to do it. It's required by your approved cap. Please, no more delays. Let's get on it. We have a crisis.
Thank you, Hannah. So you may have observed in that there was a timer there, so you get 3 minutes to speak. There was a microphone. The person speaking was passionate about climate. He mentioned the CAP, which is a climate action plan. He reminded the city council that they had made a commitment that they have a climate action plan and that they need to adhere to it. So he was, holding the elected officials accountable, reminding them of things that they committed to. Also urging up, he had his position and opinion on what he thought we should do. He had a suggestion for action, like he wanted a topic included on environment. He also asked a question like, hey, how come there's no young people that come to your meetings? Have you ever thought about that? So there was just a lot, a lot in that public testimony, but it was a good example. So he was still kind of reminding us and putting some pressure on us as elected officials to do something, but he did it he didn't, name call. He wasn't yelling. I felt like he was very respectful. And that's really important, I think, is that you want to be clear about what you're asking so that we can see and hear like, hey, this is what they're asking us, and not be trying to decipher a message like, what do they really want us to do? I'm not sure. um so I think he was very good and clear in the ask that he wanted to do, and he was reminding us, and again, it was done in a way that I think was effective, and respectful, and and again, holding us accountable. So a couple tips, and I will share a tip sheet with you all, so you'll get it as like a PDF or a link when we send the slides and the recording this week. You'll get some links, and I'll go more into detail of this the tips. But it is important that when and if you decide to give public testimony, that you are clear. And here are some tips to help you to do that. So one is know the process. So public testimony can be made in person, via email, website, or on the phone, depending on the agency. Be sure to research the process and deadlines for the agency you are addressing. So process and deadlines vary by agency. If you've ever been to a county board of supervisor meeting, sometimes those meetings go very long. They've had to kind of change the way they facilitate those meetings because especially around the height of the pandemic, people were really upset about the changing landscape of, businesses being closed, um, and mask wearing, all that kind of stuff. People had differing opinions about that, on how the public health crisis was handled. And so people came out and talked about that subject a lot. And they just also did a lot of public shaming of elected officials. I will say that I have been involved for over 20 years in attending meetings and following, elected officials and like local policies. And it's never been so bad where I feel like people can be very disrespectful when they address public officials, whether it's showing up to their events in person, leaving nasty messages on their social media accounts, because remember, they can't delete these messages, they're not supposed to, or showing up in the council chambers or the chambers of wherever these meetings are taking place and tell people that they're overweight, comment on people's race, make fun of them. So it's really a really sad space to see that some people feel that that's okay. And so yeah, so I would just say that I definitely don't like to see that. Whether you agree with a person or not, I feel it's important to be respectful, because it's just the nice human thing to do, and we're all people at the end of the day, and we should all treat people with dignity and respect, really. So it's unfortunate that there are people that show up to some of these meetings and talk off topic on things, or just kind of want to be funny, or just want to harass an elected official, and they've had to take measures where if that happens, they'll be asked to leave. So if that happens, people do get asked to leave. So yeah, it's just a thing that I have observed as a really changing landscape in how public officials are treated and how they're communicated to. But the city clerk that I mentioned in the past, like, that's your go-to person to help you navigate what time, what's my deadline, how do I fill out this form so I can speak, please show me. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Usually the slips are inside the chambers of where you will meet, and they're usually by the door, and there you just fill out a slip on, I want to speak on this topic. And usually name is just enough for the record. You don't have to provide your address. So just know that you can provide your zip code and your name. And the topic that you want to talk about, to help them know when it's your turn to speak. And before you speak, remember that you're an expert. You're an expert because you live in your neighborhood and you see day to day what's happening. So you are an expert, and remember that. It's normal to feel nervous speaking in public. You have a unique lived experience and you know your neighborhood best. That's always a reminder when you want to give yourself a confident boost before you go speak. You want to greet the public official like the person in that video did. So research the titles of the leaders, decision makers you are speaking to. It's always good to just say, mayor and council, as a, as a starting point. Introduce yourself, state your name and where you live and who you are representing. Again, you can just say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I live in, City Heights. I'm in District 9. I'm a voter. I'm a business owner. I'm a mother. Whatever you want to uplift, definitely use that to your opportunity. Here's an example that I wrote down. My name is Maria Lopez, and I am a lifelong resident in District 1. So you could say that, like you've been there for a long time. Go ahead. If you were born there, say that I was born and raised in this community. State your issue, clear, ask a request of them. What do you want them to do or know? Example, tonight I ask that you vote yes. Let's assume that you're commenting on a specific agenda item. Tonight I ask you that you vote yes in support of extra funding for a community garden in my neighborhood. And the more specific you can get, the better. And then why, right? Explain why. Share a story or explain why this issue is important to you. And stories are so powerful. I mean, there's been times where, I've been moved to tears with public testimony. And I'll never forget the time that a man who was unhoused came to city council and spoke. And who better than people who are, unhoused, speaking about issues that they have lived experience in. Like, that's who I want to hear about. And just the way he spoke and the things he said that he dealt with on a day-to-day basis. And the fact that he apologized for how he looked. Oh, I mean, I was just choked up, and that was one of those things where, once we were done with the meeting, I had a good cry. So stories are so powerful, and they can really drive home a point that you're trying to make with the election official. An example could be, no community gardens currently exist in my neighborhood, and the closest grocery store is more than 4 miles away. We lack healthy and fresh food options in my neighborhood. Remind them, because again, sometimes remember they represent different districts, and so in one district they might not have access to grocery stores or fresh produce, but in others they might have Jimbo's, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods. Again, they represent different areas, so it's really important to explain things to them, because they're all listening to you. And then wrap up and thank them. Remember to close with a memorable statement and thank them for listening. Example, again, you can reiterate a point that you want to close with. I ask that you vote yes to prioritize funding for a community garden in District 1 for this next budget cycle. My neighbors and I thank you for your time and consideration. All right, let me look real quick on, okay, just a comment on a previous supervisor. All right, questions so far? And Hannah, if you don't mind, just stop sharing slide for a moment so I could see everybody and see if anybody has questions.
For sure. I think Chris put a question
Oh,
there.
let me see here. Oh, thank you, Chris. Sorry, I missed that. It says, so articulate and concise. How do we hold the council accountable on a time crunch when they keep saying we're working on it? Yes. So that would be important. And that's true. That's the one thing that I didn't mention. Thanks for reminding me, Chris, is government is really slow and very bureaucratic, and it just takes a long time. And it's really frustrating. And my least favorite thing about government is just how slow it is. Like, it's really frustrating. And so I would just say, I would maybe make an appointment with the staff and ask them, hi, can you give me an idea of what a time frame is? Or can you help me understand what some of the delays are? Will this be included in the next budget cycle? Budget years are end in June. So right now we just finished budget season. So a lot of times you plan for the year ahead. So if you want something for next year, you would have had to included it in the June budget. So it depends on what it is. I would just say continue to follow up, be respectful. Give offices at least a couple weeks to respond, because it takes some weeks to sometimes see your email. And it depends on the jurisdiction. So County Board of Supervisors, they don't respond directly. So you'll rarely get a supervisor to respond directly to you. Usually it's like their staff. So even though you're sending something to a supervisor, they have staff that are looking at their emails. And then they'll, depending on what your email is, if it's a scheduling request, they'll send it to the scheduler. If it's like a land use thing, they'll send it to their land use person. If it's economic development, they'll loop in their economic development person. And again, they usually answer things in the order that they come in, and they represent, thousands of people. So depending on how many emails they're getting a day, you're kind of like, you might be number 200, and that's just when they get to you. So just being mindful that you're not going to get a response the same week. If you do, well, that's great. Good for you. But that's usually not the case. If you're like in a city like Carlsbad or San Marcos, a smaller city, you will probably hear from the elected official, which, by the way, they don't have staff at cities. It's like they're part-time council members. They don't make a lot of money. They have other jobs to pay their bills. They don't have staff. They have like maybe a scheduler that they share, but like everything that they do, like they have to research policy. They have to read their agenda. Nobody briefs them on like, hey, let me tell you what your agenda says and what questions you should ask. Like other elected officials, like sometimes when I'm in meetings with other elected officials, they'll come and they'll have a memo that their staff prepared on like what's on the agenda and what questions and like highlights. I'm like, I wish I had that. I have to read my own stuff and like digest my own information and then make a determination, right? So just be mindful that capacity depends on the size of the office and how many. And I would just not be afraid to follow up, Chris, and be specific on like, hi, I'm following up after 2 months. I haven't heard back. Just checking in what the status is, and maybe what you feel is the time that it will be done, right? And sometimes they just don't know, and that's just real. Sometimes, and I get this all the time from staff. Is like they're like, we're doing the best we can, and sometimes I can't even get answers to questions because it takes a long time just to answer my question. It's really kind of it's an interesting dynamic. So it just depends. It depends, Chris. But don't be afraid to follow up and be respectful, and at least let a few weeks pass before you do, because be realistic about the time that it takes them. Anyone else?
Thank you, Consuelo. There's a couple more questions in the chat from
Okay.
Christina.
Okay, let's see here. So the Port of San Diego, how is the Port of San Diego involved in government? So the Port of San Diego does have a port commission, and they usually are appointed by different jurisdictions. So an example, because it's been in the paper a lot, is National City. They had a port commissioner that they changed recently. And so usually it's elected officials or other leaders that get into those positions that represent different communities and interests. So Port of San Diego has their own kind of governance structure, and they interact with different jurisdictions. I interact with them, well, mostly staff, but with the Air Pollution Control District, because they're governed by the Air Pollution Control District. Also, like Bayside communities near the ports, they usually have like a representative in the Port of San Diego as well. So they're just another governing body. They should, Christina, to my knowledge, I believe they should. But it has to be something like that they have a connection to the port. And I do know for sure, I think Chula Vista and for sure National City, but I believe also Chula Vista might have a port. I don't know all who sits on that, but they should have their own kind of webpage and kind of guidance of who sits on the board when they meet. Those meetings should be public as well. So I would encourage you to look at the Port of San Diego. But like Escondido doesn't have a representative on the Port of San Diego, for example, because we're inland. And then another question Christina asked, why aren't community gardens a part of all joint use community schools and parks? That should be a given. How do we bridge school board, soups? Who else needs to be persuaded? Thanks for the information and encouragement. So schools are governed by school boards, and they have their own decision makers. And we do, as like, I know for me in the city, we do have like, I sit on the committee that interacts with the schools. So it depends on what's on the agenda, who's going to bring it forward. So again, it's all individual. There's no like one size fits all for government. You have to individually work with the different jurisdictions and municipalities. And that requires, if you want to see more parks, if it's a county park, you go to the county. If it's a city park, you go to the city. If you want community gardens and schools, then go to the school boards. That's where you would be able to advocate for those needs. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Does anybody want to share an experience who has done public testimony? Who hasn't? Anybody want to share on some of those? I know some of you have done it because I see some of you on here, and I know some of you have given public comment. So want to see if any of you want to share. I'm looking. Okay, I don't see anyone volunteering themselves. Okay, well, we're gonna practice. Let's go to the next slide.
There's one more question that came in.
Okay, let me get out of my full view mode. Okay, so how did SDG allow for their services to be taken over by a private company? Okay, yeah, so I'm assuming you're talking about Clean Energy Alliance. So that's not a private company, it's a joint powers authority. So that means governments got together to form a joint powers authority. So it's really government that it's a government agency, a joint government agency that has decided to do that. And that was I remember when that was happening, and City of Escondido is part of the Clean Energy Alliance. It was to bring more clean, renewable energy to the region and also save some money. And then instead of, profits going to a private company, it was like any profits that or money that could be made or saved could be used for like projects within those jurisdictions. So that's what I remember happening on why there was a move away from SDG&E is really having more control over the type of energy that options that are given to cities. It was also a money saver, and then the monies that are generated could be used for like projects and community benefits. It says trash in Carlsbad went to a private company. Yeah, I don't know who that private company is, but for sure the Clean Energy Alliance is not a company. They're a joint powers authority, so those are actually government agencies. And there's different ones. There's San Diego Power, which is City of San Diego, or Community Power, and then Clean Energy Alliance is like more of the North County cities. Yeah, and sometimes cities do privatize some things. Carlsbad is actually a charter city, which I didn't even get into the charter, but pretty much the charter is they have more local control because they're not governed by a general law charter, which is at the state level. So they have like their own constitution that they have to pass through the voters, but they get to like do things differently and have more local control. So some cities like Carlsbad, City of San Diego are charter cities, so they can have different rules than a lot of the other cities. So there can be it depends on for charter cities, my personal opinion on them is like it depends on who's in power whether charter cities are a good or bad thing because it could get rid of some good things, but it's also a good tool for local control and you can write rules that are beneficial to your community. So depending on the charter city, some cities are charter city, like Oceanside is a charter city, Carlsbad is a charter city, City of Chula Vista is a charter city, City of San Diego is a charter city. Those are the ones that come up to mind. So they have a lot of flexibility in doing things as well, because they are charter cities. I forgot to mention that. I meant to. All right, let's go ahead. And any other questions before we move on to? Okay, so let's practice, everybody. We're not going to put you into groups or anything, but I would like for you to just take 5 minutes to practice drafting a, public comment. So just for the mechanics of it, if you could we're gonna stay on for 5 minutes still, and if you could practice public comment. So think of a topic that you're interested in. Thanks for keeping that up, Hannah. Think of a practice that you're interested in, and it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 minutes. By the way, another thing with public comment, it could be so simple. Like, hi, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for the presentation, or thank you for talking about this topic. I just want to register that I ask you to vote no on item number 5. It could be as simple as that. Like if you just want them to vote no on this item and you don't want to get into it, but you just want them to vote no, you can actually say, please vote no, thank you. And it could be like a few seconds. So don't think that you have to have this really elaborate, long public testimony. It could be as simple as like, please vote no, thank you. And it's registered as a no vote. So yeah, just so to make it less intimidating, feel free to start simple and go from there. And then I would encourage you who have messaged about different things, maybe like Christina, you can maybe make your comment be about community gardens, and maybe Chris, you can talk about the port, And then Zoom, I forget who the Zoom is. You can ask about, you can make a comment about utilities. So, and I do see another comment, but I'll wait on that and I'll give you all a few minutes to just practice your public comment. Pretend like you're speaking to a city council member or a board of supervisor and practice your introductions and what you want to talk about. And I'll come back in 5 minutes. Yeah, I'll give one more minute. And I would love if someone would share an example. So let's see who would want to do that.
I'll share. It's Christina here.
Perfect. All right. Go ahead, Christina.
Now, it's interesting because I've shared this before, but now I don't know who specifically I would be going to, because I'll tell it to anybody. I'll scream at the top of a mountain. Hello, and thank you for taking the time, public official. My name is Christina Bambino. I'm a mother. I am a climate action steward and advocate for food justice. I'm hoping that we can please help expedite natural living playgrounds and gardens at joint use and community parks, not only for bridging academic gaps, but also for improving all of our neighbors and multi-generational population that needs community space. Thank you very much. I look forward to following up with any questions if there are any. Have a great day.
Yay, good job, Christina. Good job. Yes, and so Christina was very polite. She seemed passionate about what she was talking about. She started with like, I'm a mother, so you can understand like why it's important for her to advocate for this issue. And she also mentioned that she would be following up. Another thing that you can do, which just reminded me, Christina, when you shared, is you can also bring information and give it to the nice clerk. Remember, we're being nice to the clerk. You can also maybe like say, hey, I've just if you visual, you know, I don't encourage you to bring flash drives, and cities have had to kind of stop that because of just protecting the, you know, ITs and the infrastructure, the information technology infrastructure. So they don't really allow people to bring like outside things to plug into computers. But one thing that does happen, you know, when I'm in a council meeting is sometimes someone will say, this problem is so bad, like this is happening, and they have pictures of things that need to be fixed. And so they'll bring copies or a copy for all of us, and we all share it, and they give it to the clerk. So while you're talking, you can go to the clerk and be like, oh, when I speak, I'd like to share this with the council members. And you can leave like printed photos, or your business card, or please give this to the council members on my behalf, so that they have something when you speak. So that's also another thing that you could do is leave something with the city clerk, like a business card, a flyer, if you want to invite them. You can also use this to invite people. Like, hi, we're having a tour of our community garden, and we'd really much like to see you there. Here's, you know, a free, you know, here's a flyer. Just bring this flyer and you can come, or things like that. Or this is a special invitation for you. You can also like do that and bring flyers and things like that. So super important. And then just one thing I want to touch on before I forget. Thank you, Karen, for reminding me. How do you learn what the city council is going to talk about, or the board of supervisors? Usually 72 hours before or more, they'll post an agenda on their city clerk or their board of supervisor page or their city council page. They'll post an agenda of what they're going to talk about. So you could see the agenda, the order of the items that will be discussed, and any additional information that references that item. So I very much encourage you to like look at agendas. I signed up for the City of San Diego. There's a way for you to sign up on their clerk's page to get their agenda. So anytime there's an agenda revision, or they add a new presentation, or any type of changes in what's happening on the agenda, they'll email me and be like, hey, the council agenda is out, or hey, we made a revision to the city council agenda. So I'm on their email list, and so I can just click on that email and it'll take me to their page and their agenda. And the cities have so many like subcommittees and meetings, but it's a lot to track. You have to be intentional about like, oh, it's Thursday, I'm going to check the agenda today and see if there's something that I want to speak about. You can also write to them if you're not able to make it in person. Okay, Chris, you have a question?
Yes, my question is, so it's interesting because we're often told celebrate and invite public officials, you know, to different events, you know, like our community garden. But it's like kind of embarrassing when, you know, there's obviously an indifference. There's indifference to the inequity, the blatant inequity. So I don't know if you have any comments about that. Just for example, like $6 million is being spent just around the corner. And then our little park is still, you know, we're exasperated with, you know, the urban heat island at our schools. We're struggling for decades with, you know, academic, you know, troubles. And now I have a six-year-old first grade and somebody in fifth grade, going to fifth grade. So do you have any comment on how to get around that feeling of interacting with these people who may be able to help, yet still there's a delay there? Thank you again.
Yes. Sure. And sorry, I meant Chris Mock, but you both have similar names, so I apologize. So I'll come back to you, Christine, in a moment.
You're on mute.
Sorry, Chris, did you want to ask a question? Sorry.
Hi, I was wondering if I could do the practice, like speaking to a council.
Please. Yes, go ahead and share. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Chris Mock. I use he and they pronouns, and I'm the owner of Chris Mock Creations, a culinary and mixed media art company. I provide catering, cooking lessons, private chef services, meal plans, and also sell paintings and do art commissions. Thank you for hearing me out today. I am wondering what assistance District 4 can provide to small business owners like me. I know that there is SCORE, which helps small business owners with free advice and mentorship, which I already work with, and also there are financial assistance programs as well. I officially started my company in 2019, and the ongoing pandemic has put a strain on opportunities, especially as my partner is immunocompromised, so I have to be extra careful with what jobs I take. I'm curious what else can be done by the city to assist micro businesses in their efforts to remain sustainable as much as possible, and actually start to make money instead of always being in the red, as I'm constantly just trying to reinvest into my business. Thank you so much for your time.
Yay. Good job, Chris. Thank you so much. And that's great. It's great to introduce like businesses and let them know, who's in their community. And like that's great that you're talking about micro businesses because a lot of times there's a focus on like bigger businesses or, bringing in the biotech companies and, who's going to bring, that kind of stuff. But there is this movement, I think, for more of the micro businesses as well as brick and mortars, rent is ridiculous, right? So yeah, I think it's good to just remind them of like the different businesses that are in their community and you're asking them a question. And then I'm glad that you mentioned this because they can't respond to you. They're not allowed to respond to you when they're up on the dais because it's public comment. And so especially non-agendized public comment, they can't have like a conversation, but later on they could like follow up with you. So you can leave your contact information on that form. And you can also follow up with them and say, hi, I'm the person who spoke last week, just following up to see if you can, help me understand what resources the city offers for like micro businesses. And they'll probably send you to economic development, right? But it's good to get on the radar. And then if you're not able to kind of navigate systems and find out who to talk to, it's totally fine to reach out to elected officials and be like, hi, help me. Who do I talk to? Because they'll know, or they'll find out for you. So definitely something that you can totally use public testimony for. Go ahead, Chris.
Follow-up question. I'm really glad that you mentioned so I do have challenges with working with systems and knowing what's appropriate, what the procedural steps are in getting my stuff done, getting, contacting the people. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that because that is a huge challenge for me.
It is. And I would just say a good starting point is to start on the city website or county website and try to see if you can figure out. And if you can't, you can be like, hi, I'm having trouble finding this information. Could you please help me direct me to a contact? And usually what happens is like at the county level or city of San Diego, they're going to direct you to staff anyway. So the elected official is not responding to that inquiry.
Right.
It's usually one of their staffers, which is what they're there for.
Okay.
They have specialty areas that they focus on for that elected official. And then they also have council representatives or board of supervisor representatives that represent the different neighborhoods. And if you're in that neighborhood, they'll probably want to like have form a relationship with you and get to know you better. So I would just, and again, get on their newsletters because it's really, and they might even share resources about businesses. I see elected officials always sharing grant opportunities and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And then really quick, I'm sorry, Christina, your question. Oh yeah, on just kind of like not feeling heard. And then there's another question on here about San Diego used to be Republican, but it's now all Democrat. It shouldn't be all one way or the other, and equal parties should always be reserved to serve the public if it's an obvious imbalance of power. So I want to address those because they're kind of tied together. So, you know, you might not feel heard or you might not agree with the ideology or the priorities of your elected official. And let me just tell you, I have been in that club for a very long time. And that was a reason that I ran for office. So I know what it feels like to not feel heard by your elected official, to not feel like the people who represent you share your priorities, your concerns, your lived experience. And that's still a challenge that I face today as a resident of my city. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't engage and you should give up, right? And hopefully at the hyperlocal level, that doesn't matter as much. And I will say that I'm very happy that all county board of supervisors, we do have a relationship with all the offices. And when we ask for information, they have all been very responsive to us. So that is a really good thing. And I hope that's an experience that others have. I do feel like at the supervisor level, people that I know who interact with different offices they're responded to. If for whatever reason you just feel like, oh, I just can't get through, like I don't feel like they listen, maybe see who they do listen to, and see if you can form an alliance with them. And that's more of like strategy and like long-term, things like that. But like, for example, I'll use the example of Chris because he just shared his testimony. Chris, maybe Chris is like struggling to reach that office as a, small business, right? Maybe, and it could be the chamber, it could be a different business advocacy group. Maybe the elected official that you're trying to reach who doesn't really seem to like, you don't get a lot of traction with them. Maybe they're really like huge supporters of the Chamber of Commerce or something like that, or a community development organization. I would say maybe try going to their events and being like, hi, I'm so and so. Maybe join that organization and kind of see if they can help you. So find out like where they spend their time, what associations do they belong to, and really try to forge alliances with other groups and meet other people, because a lot of times, you're now part of this new entity that maybe they have a relationship or listen to. So just find ways and kind of learn about them, read their bios, find out like, things that they like, and try to relate to them as people, you know? And that's something that you can like bring up. And I'll tell you, every single elected official that I've met, whether I agree with them or not, there's something I can name, at least one thing, maybe two, of something that I respect about them. Like, oh, you know what? I've met so and so, and this person is actually like, we share common areas in this. And I would just say, try to figure out what that common area is and try to like maybe lean into that a little more. That can be like an entry point. But I think most of you will probably start with like the staff level, and then work your way up from there. And again, if anything, if there's anything that you specifically that you have a question on after this training, I'm happy to chat with you. If you're in a city that's not the city of San Diego, like I see some North County folks here, that are obviously not city of San Diego, like feel free to reach out and we can maybe like, you can ask me a question and I can try to like give you an answer. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. Thank you so much. I hope that was helpful, everyone. Thanks for you who stuck it out. It's not a short webinar and it's a lot of information that I threw at you, and we're almost wrapping up here. Just some additional tips on based on personal experience. Here's some things to consider. So document everything, especially names and dates. So when you speak to someone, find out what the names of the person you spoke to. If you called someone and they weren't helpful, find out who their name is and what department they're in. What number did you call? What did they tell you? Kind of keep a little notebook or something and write down what it is. Assume that you're going to have to repeat yourself over and over, because you're talking to different people. It's kind of like when you call the cable company and you have an issue and then they say, hold on, that's not my department. Let me transfer you to the other department. And then you get transferred to the other department and that's not the right department either. And you're like, why did you give me the wrong number? That kind of stuff happens in government too. So bring your patience that day and just kind of be like, hey, I'm going to, be prepared to repeat yourself and just kind of have your facts straight, because, in frustration, you might omit some facts. Be nice and establish a positive reputation. Don't be I'm sure the elected official staff oh, it's so-and-so again. She's going to start yelling at me, and they kind of tune out. So be nice, establish a positive reputation. Don't be that person that they don't want to talk to. And then be prepared when they follow up. Like, so Chris, when you're ready to follow up, know what you're going to talk about. Their time is very valuable. They have a lot of people that they serve and help. So just be mindful that you are one of thousands of people who need their help and have needs. And there's endless needs and there's not endless money. And it's okay to follow up. But again, I mentioned give it a few weeks to follow up because they're busy. And I put this picture of the San Pasqual Valley plan because it's a plan that was developed years ago. And sometimes when there's new administration and new staff, right? Because when elected officials change, their staffs change, they forget what work was done before. And so sometimes there's plans, reports, studies that have been done on the topic that they now want to talk about, but they don't know that like 10 years ago they did the exact same study that they want to do now, and that's money that was already invested. So like use what's already there. So it's good for you to remind them, hey, actually there's already a plan, and here it is. And the reason I say that is because the city doesn't keep records like they used to. Now with everything moving from paper to like cloud-based retention records, that the time frame of keeping that stuff has really changed. Like in my city email disappear automatically after 90 days. So if I want to be like, oh yeah, I talked to some guy 6 months ago, let me go back and look for his email, I don't have it anymore. I have to like intentionally save that and back that up myself, because my emails disappear after 90 days. Because it's just that's the record retention policy of the city. So don't assume that they'll have that information or they have copies of leases and contracts. Keep that stuff. Keep everything keep that documentation. Okay, there's a website that's getting blocked and I'm not sure which one it is, but we'll figure that out. And then just another thing to speak on the thing about, yes, when there's a majority and they just don't represent you, just continue to show up and continue to go in public testimony and talk about the issues that you care about. Don't just give up because, the majority doesn't, agree with you. And remember that elected officials are always changing. They retire, they move, they decide to run for higher office, and then they leave because they're eyeing the next position. There's term limits now, so they won't be there forever. So that's just a little light at the end of the tunnel, that change will always be there. Who's there in office now will not be there forever. um they might run for something else, like I said. So just know that, just stick it out. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've seen government in the region change significantly, and conversations have changed. And yeah, it's something that I know, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm very passionate about getting involved in my own backyard where I live, and just in the region, and just it's really a place where you can make a difference and that you actually can have an impact. So it's not dysfunctional like the level that we're seeing at the federal government or sometimes the state government. It's really an opportunity where you can really have an impact and see things change. So I would say get excited about local government. Next slide. Thank you. We have 4 minutes left. We made it. Congratulations to you all who stuck it out almost 2 hours. You are amazing. I hope that you found this information helpful and useful, and that you have takeaways to use, that you now know who your elected officials are. This is just the first step. This is a foundation. We will offer more trainings in the future. Give me your feedback on more things that you'd like to learn. But again, the first step was knowing who are our elected officials and the basic functions of government and how to start the conversations. Any additional questions that you have, we'll open it up for a minute for that. But anything else like specific to you on a specific situation, let's hold off on that. And maybe you can email me.
I just thought,
Yeah.
just when you said that the retention policy with some changes is only 90 days, is that a shift that's been happening? That seems like a really short period of time.
It is. Yeah, and all jurisdictions vary. So for my city,
Okay.
it's 90 days. Some of them it's 6 months, some of them it's 1 year. So it just
Mm,
depends on the
okay.
jurisdiction. But I would
Okay.
assume, so I would just say like keep your emails, especially if decision makers are involved, like keep your emails. Because and then you can also do request things, and that's the thing, you can do requests, but again, they might not have the records. So I always like, when there's something that I want to save, I always like back it up, like, oh, I'm going to save this. And then that's kind of my way of like holding on to it, because there's too many times where I'm like, oh, what was the email of that person? I want to follow up with them. I haven't had the time and space to think
Right.
about what they wanted me to talk to them about, And so yeah, I just wanted you to be mindful that you have to be your own best advocates. Like no one's going to advocate like you advocate, and you're your own best advocate and champion. So keep your documentation, get your facts straight, because hey, this happened on this day, because that is just such a powerful tool for creating change, is having facts. Because if someone disagree with you, they might be like, oh, well, you gave me wrong facts, and that just don't allow that to happen. That's why I always suggest being your own documenters, record keepers, and you have your facts ready to go, and you're always prepared when you're engaging them. Any other question
Well, thank you.
before I go to the next slide? And I will share my email, so you will have this. Again, you will get the slides, you will get the recording, you will get the providing public testimony tip sheet. We'll embed links for the different websites that we discussed. And please save the date, because next month we open registration for our 4th annual gathering for San Diego County Food Vision 2030. It will be held at the beautiful California Center for the Arts in Escondido, so right in my hometown, on Thursday, October 17th. It's an all-day event. You won't want to miss it. We bring together over 500 folks within the food system who are passionate about changing our food system. We're going to have amazing workshops, amazing local food that has been grown here. So you won't want to miss it. There'll be networking, guest speakers, some elected officials and their staff will be there, so that you can even like find them there at the gathering. So yeah, so I hope to see you there. I will definitely be there. And it's always a beautiful event that our staff just, is so intentional with every single detail. And if you've ever been, it's amazing. And it just continues to get amazing every year. Next slide. And so then I leave you all with my contact information. It's been a pleasure sharing this information. I love this topic. I'm happy to connect with you offline. So shoot me an email if you want to chat more. Let me know what ideas and other things maybe I can go deep dive on, because this was just a foundation. I know I gave you a lot of information, but I hope you found it helpful. And I hope it's not the last time we hear from each other. And yeah, I will look forward to hearing from you, everyone. And I hope that you enjoy your lunch because it is now 12 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
And I'm just gonna stay on a few minutes and to look at the chat so I make sure I can get back to people. But yeah, everyone, enjoy your lunch. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a beautiful week.